All right, folks, welcome. Thank you for joining our monthly scheduled Howard County Democratic Central Committee meeting. This is our next episode in the Meet the Governor candidate series. For this episode, we are delighted to welcome former Maryland Attorney General Doug Gansler, who is here with us, who is a candidate for governor. We're going to hear his vision for Maryland, and then we'll open it up to Central Committee for some Q&A. So without further ado, please welcome candidate for governor, Doug Gansler.
Thank you, Shahan, and thanks for your infusion of energy into the Howard County Democratic Party and what you've done, and all of you on the call tonight for caring enough to be here as we look into the headwinds of what's going to be the most Republican year of our lives. So get ready, stand strong. I know Josh is out there doing his military duty. He's going to need that as we go forward coming into this year. Also want to mention Judge O'Malley, a former Judge O'Malley's on the here and talking about former attorneys general. Her dad was an incredible attorney general for 20 years and was, besides being a great attorney general, is one of the most decent, kind, thoughtful human beings that I've ever met, and just did a wonderful job there. And she's, I suppose, is going to be on the agenda. That's why she's here to speak tonight, and you'll hear her vision as well. What is the second most powerful job in Maryland and arguably the best job in Maryland. Because I don't know all of you, let me just give you a quick background. I grew up in Maryland. I've been coming to Howard County. I remember when Columbia was first started when I was young. So been there for a long time. That means I'm very old, which means I was in government for 23 years. I clerked for the Maryland Court of Appeals after college and law school. Became an assistant United States attorney as a federal prosecutor under Eric Holder for the most part in the District of Columbia. Did homicide prosecutions for most of that. Then I ran for state's attorney of Montgomery County, served there for 8 years. While there, we started the first domestic violence dockets in Maryland history. We started the first drug courts in Maryland history. We was the first office in the country to fully implement community prosecution, which helps sort of bridge the gap of trust between law enforcement and the people that they serve. And I started on criminal justice reform, which is actually part of community prosecution. I was the head of the NAACP Criminal Justice Committee in Montgomery County, started in 1989, and started working on issues. For example, every time a police shot his or her weapon, when I was state's attorney, we put those cases in front of the grand jury. We didn't whitewash them. We let the folks in the community decide whether or not that was a justified shooting or not. Ran for attorney general, it was obviously a big leap. No one from Montgomery County in one statewide office for a very, very long time at that point. And we were able to win on the message that we delivered to the folks around the state, and served there for 8 years. Did a number of things there that I guess I'll talk about on the call. But one of those years I served as president of all the attorneys general for the United States. Ran for governor in 2014 against the sitting lieutenant governor at the time, Anthony Brown. We lost that race. And Governor and Larry Hogan ended up winning the race, and we've had a Republican governor for the last 8 years. And it's interesting because as we look forward, and I'll talk about this in a second, I saw Governor Hogan, and then a guy who was not governor, who's a real estate developer in an office park in Prince George's County, who was driving around in a bus. And he said to me at a Johnny Woods picnic 3 weeks after the election, "Hey, sorry you lost, but it was great for me." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "Well, we polled a week before the election. We had you beating us by 22 points, us beating Anthony Brown by 3, and they ended up winning by more." And I say that because that was a very Democratic year. 2018 was a very Democratic year. We lost by the biggest margin of any Democrat in the history of Maryland, and now we're confronting an enormous election this year. And as I go around the state, we do have great candidates. Most of them, haven't run for office before, but they're very good people. Some of them are from New York. Some of them all of them have different walks of life. And but what I hear from people as I go around the state, and I go to every part of the state, is that people want someone with experience. They want someone who's led before, not for the sole purpose of having experience. And I have 23 years in government, but somebody who can understand how the levers of government work. And that's the first thing the Democrats want. And the second thing they want is someone that can win the general election this year. So let me start out with the experience piece. We're in a time of crisis. We're coming out of COVID, hopefully relatively soon, but we're certainly challenged by COVID, and the economy in our state need somebody who has done that before. And the reason why we know that I can do it is because I've done it before, to lead us back, to build up the economy, make sure we not only have jobs, but support the small businesses that provide those jobs, and even bigger businesses that we want to lure into the state. We have of the Fortune 500, in fact, there are 500 of them. We have 3 headquartered in Maryland. So we need to bring that back. But we also need to make sure that when we do so, we do it through the lenses of inclusion and making sure we tap the talents of every Marylander as we go forward. It's the kind of thing that I did before when I was president of the Attorneys General. I ran the national mortgage foreclosure crisis, and we fought the big banks. We were able to keep, we got almost $2 billion in Maryland to keep people in their homes and away from being evicted by those banks and being foreclosed upon. And the same kind of fortitude is going to take place, need to take place as we rebuild out of COVID. The second crisis that I've led during, and is a big issue, is climate change. And that is one of the biggest issues for me going forward. And clearly I'm the only person in the race on the Democratic side, actually probably both sides, that has sort of a background and a record of accomplishment on the climate and the environment. That was why I ran for Attorney General. That was my biggest issue when I was Attorney General. We did 22 river audits. We had the biggest prosecutions in terms of air, water, and asbestos in Maryland's history. And we need to, as we look forward, we need to really make Maryland the leader on climate change on the East Coast. The number of things there. We need to make sure we have offshore wind off of Ocean City, solar powered, residential, commercial, and on public spaces throughout the state. We need to create the infrastructure for the electric vehicle influx that is literally and figuratively being driven by the private sector. And we need to do one of my pet peeves, which is I was not able to do as Attorney General, which is to convert the 2 billion pounds of chicken manure that goes into the Chesapeake Bay each year into a power source in the Eastern Shore, a clean power source, and create an environment where we can have less sprawl and more open space, more agriculture, and support our watermen. The third crisis that I'd like to talk about briefly is crime. Baltimore City is an amazing place. I was a season ticket holder for the Orioles starting in 1989. I love the city, and I hate seeing what's happening to it now. And we need somebody that can actually win, a Democrat with democratic values that will roll up his or her sleeves, get into Baltimore, work with the stakeholders, people like Judge O'Malley and others, and sit down at the table and make sure we're providing access to opportunity in Baltimore and throughout the state, but on public health, on housing, on jobs, on education, and crime and criminal justice. And these are issues that are confronting Baltimore now with 350 or some odd murders a year. And that's just the murders. You can't have businesses open downtown when people are afraid to go there. And, this is the kind of thing I did remember I led the Beltway snipers investigation and prosecution and so many other crimes and prosecutions and make sure we did it in a fair, equitable way. But to really make public safety the number one priority. That's the biggest priority and responsibility of government, to keep its people safe and its citizens safe. And I think, and I'm the only person in the race that has a scintilla of background in criminal justice, and really excited about taking on that issue because it's exploding everywhere. I mean, Montgomery County, where I am, we have 1.1 million people, and there's 13 new officers in the academy. And so crime is actually spiking here in Howard County as well. And the last issue is the issue of choice, women's reproductive rights. I had fortunate enough when I was Attorney General to argue in front of the Supreme Court on a sex offense case. We were able to win that case 9-0. I understand how they operate. They don't take the cases because they want a rubber stamp. In this case, Roe v. Wade. They took the case on December 1st because they're either going to overturn Roe v. Wade or they're going to scale it back. And, I had the same type of issue when I was faced with marriage equality. And I led the statewide elected officials on the marriage equality issue. Went down 3 or 4 years ahead of time, testified in Annapolis. And then I wrote an opinion recognizing out-of-state same-sex marriage here in Maryland, where only 6 states had marriage equality. And for my efforts, the far right actually literally began impeachment proceedings against me. Well, we're going to need to have that same type of social consciousness willing to fight in terms of keeping women's reproductive rights. And that gets to the campaign. And so, the Republican Governors Association has figured out that I'm the only Democrat in the field that could actually beat Kelly Schultz. The Goucher poll just showed recently, about 6, 7 weeks ago that in Maryland, the most Democratic state in the country, this year, a moderate Republican would beat a progressive Democrat. And I would argue I'm as progressive as anybody, but I'm not perceived to be for whatever reason, by almost 20%. And so the Republican Governors Association just this week started launching attacks against me, saying I was just like Terry McAuliffe and supporting teachers and all this kind of nonsense, because they know I'm the only person that can actually win the general election in what purports to be an enormous Republican year, as we've seen in New Jersey, seen in Virginia. 77 million people walked into the polls 14 months ago and voted for a mentally ill, narcissistic dictator wannabe Donald Trump. So we have our work cut out for us. Howard County is going to be critical, and hope that you all will help the eventual winner. And I hope that is me and my lieutenant governor, who we'll be picking next week. So with that, Shahan, I'll take any questions if I have any time left. I may have exhausted my time.
We will certainly tee up some questions for you, Mr. Gansler. Thank you so much again for sharing that vision with us. I'd like to take this moment to open it up to Central Committee. Folks, any questions? All right. First hand up I see is Ms. Nichols. Jessica, go ahead, please.
Good evening. I am super sorry to have come in a little bit late, but I'm super excited to get to meet you. I am a public school teacher. I teach in high school here in Howard County, and I wanted to know a little bit more about your education plan. So as of right now, the blueprint has been passed, and I was wondering, what are you going to do on top of the blueprint to help do a little bit more to equalize the educational experiences of students around the country, state? Mercy.
County and state. No, it's a great question. And so I guess I'll start where I just finished, which is we have to have a Democrat that can win. If we don't have a Democrat that wins the general election, the Kerwin Commission, the blueprint will go basically, I would imagine, in the garbage. And that would be really, really sad, not for political reasons, but for the kids and the teachers and the support staff at the school. So we're in an enviable position in Maryland, which is we do have a blueprint. It's not like we have this issue where we have a minority equity gap in education and rural, suburban, and urban. And what's going on again in Baltimore is just unconscionable to these kids that are coming up and not being able to graduate from school if they're unsafe when they're there. The schools are dilapidated and so forth. So we have the blueprint. We just need to have somebody who understands how to work the levers of government. This idea of sort of shaving one day, looking in the mirror and thinking, hey, I see a governor in the mirror, I think I'll go run for that as a starter job, just isn't going to fly. And it's not going to be able to help us pass the blueprint. So we need a Democrat to work with our Democratic General Assembly. Obviously, we'll lose a lot of seats there, but we still hopefully will have, I think we will have a majority so we can get it passed. And you asked in addition, when I announced I was running, one of the things I talked about was legalizing cannabis, but also universal pre-K and universal childcare. I've been talking about universal pre-K for 10 years. And so, because what we see is as you know, as a teacher, when you show up in kindergarten, the divide is already there and you can never make up that gap. And COVID has shown us that so many women, for most part, 47%, had to lose their jobs or change their jobs because of childcare issues. So we need to have universal childcare. And then universal pre-K. And then when you show up in kindergarten, you're socially equipped and educationally equipped to advance and prosper. So I think the universal childcare would be a component that would be on top of it. And just having a consciousness, somebody who's cares about the issues of education, cares about teachers, cares about those who support our teachers, because they are educators also, and making sure the teachers are well paid. We drop our children off at school in the morning. They're there all day long with their teachers, and we don't pay the teachers like we would for any other profession. And so I think there's a lot to be done there, but obviously work with MSEA and the teachers themselves. And the way I've always governed in my 8 years as Attorney General, my 8 years as State's Attorney, is hire the best and the brightest with diversity fully in mind. In fact, when I left the Attorney General's office and when I left the State's Attorney's office, we had more women in supervisory positions than men. And put the people that are stakeholders in the room and say, you tell us what should we do here? And that's what I'll do for education. And that's what I'll do for so many of these other areas that I talked about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have
Thank
time
you.
for one more question. We do want to need to wrap this up because of timing, but we can take one more question. Anyone from Central Committee? Okay. Well, Mr. Gansler, any parting words, sir?
Oh, just look, thank you. I mean, you're going to have, and Calvin's going to have an extremely difficult race coming up. I think there's going to be a very, very difficult races in November in Howard County. Senator Hester is going to have a tough time. I mean, we really need to group after this election. I mean, we have 10 people in the governor's race, and there's 2 people, leading candidates, I would say, in the comptroller's race, 2 leading candidates in the attorney general's race. It's going to be an interesting year as we come together in November, but we do need to come together. And so Howard County is, I really think, is a critical county as it keeps continuing to grow and has more power and more strength and some great ideas. So really excited to work with you. Anybody who wants to, I think Katie Baker or Aaron put up the ability to help us out, but DougGansler.com. We love your help. And thanks again for the time, and I look forward to talking to you individually as we go forward.
Thank you so much again, former Attorney General. We really appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, candidate for governor, Doug Gansler. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks, John.